Welcome to the Seikird Healing Podcast, where the old is new, the ancient is innovative, and the forgotten is remembered. We believe that sacred healing is your birthright. Join us on each episode as we uniquely, authentically, and mystically dive into the bold and vulnerable life of many magical humans. From breath, spirituality, shadow work, and all things in the esoteric realm of healing, we don't leave any stone unturned on this bold journey of growth as we start to explore the remembrance of what it means to be human. So take a deep breath in and a deep breath out, and let's get sacred.
Welcome, humans and aliens, to the Seikird Healing Podcast. Today, I get to chat with Cathy Courtenay, who is a relational lover, a communication junkie, and a connection cultivator. And she is deeply passionate about helping people move beyond their limitations in order to enjoy the deliciousness of the full buffet of connection and love. She's a certified RLT, Relational Life Therapy coach, and a longtime Circling Method Facilitator, as well as an avid student of life. And she uses all of these tools and more to really transform relations, whether it's individuals, in groups, or in partnerships. I'm really excited for you guys to listen to this episode today with Cathy. Enjoy. All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the Seikird Healing Podcast. I am filled with gratitude and excitement today because my guest is a friend, a phenomenal relational coach, and also a leader of a methodology called Circling. But simultaneously, she is a medicine woman and a magician in cracking open people's hearts in a way that I've not seen done before with such grace and vulnerability and acceptance. And she describes herself as a communication junkie and connection cultivator. But to me, she's a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that just radiates out from her being in the way that she interacts with others, in the way that she interacts with her partner, in the way that she allows herself to flow and play, in the way that she carries herself in her own life. And she exudes a level of unfuckwithableness of knowing her internal self so well that she doesn't need to be anything other than her magical, mystical being. And so thank you for everything you brought into my life. Thank you for being on this planet at this moment in time, in this incarnation, and bringing your gifts to the world. And so without further ado, welcome Cathy Courtenay to the podcast.
Wow, Jessica, that was such a beautiful introduction, and I actually feel really seen by you. Like a lot of that felt really like it matches how I'm now coming to really understand and feel myself in a way that is not doesn't feel egoic, but just like an isness of like, oh yeah, this is, yeah, I do feel like I have an ability to crack people's hearts open, and to witness that is the biggest gift that I receive. So thank you. What a beautiful introduction.
You're welcome. And kind of to like riff on that, I met you, and it's now been like 2 years since we've met, which is just like crazy. And I've gone through probably like 5 or 6 workshops with you over the past couple of years, in person, which is just such a gift. And so, and then even more so, the last time we were together, I had the pleasure of spending time with you at dinner in Sedona, a private dinner. There were about 8 or 9 of us, and you posed a question to the table, and we went around in a circle, and we talked about what was truly alive for us at that moment. And it was unlocked, it just unlocked new layers of depth with people that I'd already known. And it was one of the most authentic and like deepening dinner party conversations that I've experienced in quite some time. And it was a really authentic reflection of what you invite into spaces that you enter. And
Mm.
specifically, what it did for me was drop me into a level of presence and a level of attention. And in my opinion, one of the greatest currencies on this planet at this moment in time is our attention and our presence. And so I just want to thank you for that lovely dinner that we had, because we haven't really caught up since then.
Mm-hmm.
And since being in that like mystical container that we were in. But
Mm-hmm.
I would love to dive into that even deeper and chat about the power of presence and the power of deeply listening, because I think it's one of
Mm.
your superpowers. So I would love to kind of start there.
Sure, thank you. Well, just to speak to that dinner party, I think what happens is we all have our conditioned communication responses, ways that we show up. We've all learned different patterns. And when you look at communication, communication can be a tool for control. So that could be, I want to say this thing so that you can see me a certain way. I want you to like affirm an identification that I like to have of myself, or I want to say this thing to get a need met, but I'm not going to be really direct about it, but I'm going to go about it this way. So without even consciously trying to manipulate, a lot of our communication tools in the sort of indirect sideways way ends up being a tool for manipulation. But if we're actually really communicating to relate in a present moment state, we are revealing ourselves. We are revealing the thing that's most true in that moment. And we are seeing other as not a means to an end, but as a means unto themselves. So like as a thing that's constantly emerging moment to moment, as a being that's constantly emerging. We're all becoming more of something in every moment. And how we hold each other in the witness of each other is a huge piece to the invitation of becoming more of who we are here to be. That was a lot of words. Did that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And it's one of the things that I've been double clicking on recently, is just deepening into listening rather than trying to figure out what I'm going to say next while the person is talking. And so
Yes.
my responses come from a deep place of authenticity rather than a rehearsed monologue of what I want to insert into the conversation, which is what you mentioned in terms of like trying to almost have like a power and a control and a manipulation of the conversation to where I want it to go. And so I've been
Yeah.
kind of going down the path of like, okay, well, how can I more deeply listen here?
Mhm.
How can I just relax into and soften into this conversation a little bit more? And it's
Mhm.
hard. It's actually very
Mhm.
hard. It's a deep practice.
Yes. When you say it's hard, what feels hard about it for you?
For me specifically, I'm like a distraction junkie. Like squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. And so it feels hard for me to actually give my currency of attention because my mind goes in so many different directions, even just with one little bit and piece. And so it's less of a like a control wanting to control the conversation for me and more of giving my attention and giving my deep listening to the person to actually truly see them and
Mm-hmm.
hear them. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's like what's most, I think. And when I say hard, it's like, yes, it's hard, but it's a practice. It's like going to yoga
Mm-hmm.
class every day. Like it is a practice.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the things to understand about listening is that most of us are not listening. I think listening is an ever growing learning practice, like you said. There's so many things asking for our attention at any moment. Um, So what I find it requires is enough kind of safety and steadiness in my own being. So listening doesn't only mean listening to what you're saying. It's also listening to what's happening inside of me right now. What am I noticing? Like what are the sensations that are here? Am I feeling my breath? Can I feel my body rooted into the ground? Like what am I connected with? And when I'm in that space of steadiness within myself, it actually makes my listening of you more available. And so we all have thoughts, we all have distractions, but it's not that we're not going to have that, but can I be aware of it and then use the tools that I know to bring me back to that grounded, centered place, checking in with breath. Maybe it's, focusing your attention on their tone. Listening also requires not just the words, but what's the context behind the words? What is their body telling me? What is it like to be with this person? And it's this beautiful thing of like, can I actually even listen and be willing to listen in a way that I might even be changed in the listening of you? So it requires also, because I don't want to take everything everyone says as my truth. And I also don't want to be so closed off that I don't take on anybody else's perspective. So that you have to find this kind of centered, grounded place inside of yourself that's, in a flow between connected and boundaried or protected at the same time. And like letting it come into my body and then sort of filtering what's to take, what's occurring in me now, like what's true here in me now after listening to you. And it might be different than the moment before I listened to you. So it's a constant flow, but it really requires a deep moment to moment, almost relational meditation.
I love how you put that. And also you mentioned the safety part of it. And one of the coolest questions that I think you ever posed in a container that changed my life, really, in terms of safety in conversation. And I think the question specifically is, what is the coping mechanism or strategy that you learned growing up that has now become your superpower?
I
And
love that one.
yeah, and it's something where it's like when we went through an exercise with that prompt, it was a total reframe and a permission slip to own that there was really never anything to find and fix, but to find, include, and transcend. And so when you talk about like, oh, we're always going to have those distractions, like I'm always going to have that. But if I look at those moments and I look at maybe some of the things that I learned in my childhood that I can now bring into my life and bring into conversation and bring into deeper listening. If I look at those moments as gifts to the creation of many superpowers, and then I get to recognize those moments and soften them, but not lose them. Like you said, like you want to have the gray area of having proper listening ability, but also having boundaries as to not take everything in as your own if it doesn't really feel true. And so doing the work with that question that you posed in a container has really been like an integration for me of, okay, what are the magical downloads and how can I reframe and reauthor that story to change any limiting belief while simultaneously getting to take the golden nugget and the shimmering pearl and rewire and rewrite so that I can include and transcend those moments rather than removing them or dimming them or shaming them. And so it's just that concept of having acceptance for some exiled parts of yourself. And in that, there has to be a level of safety to get there. And so some of that is about the container. But I would love for you to maybe talk a little bit about cultivating these superpowers and how that manifested in your life and how that became like a reframing for you, because it's something that, you led me through a workshop with that pros. And I'm just like curious as to how has that changed your life? How have you looked at your life in that way?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, I would say my coping strategy when I was a little kid, growing up in the house that I did, I was the youngest of four kids, and my parents were doing the best that they can with the tools that they had, and love them all dearly. And um, I was very aware of a lot of unspoken things in the field. Not only did I grow up in South Africa, where there was this, it was in the thick of apartheid. So there was this extreme version of, black and white, like a race, like having a black maid and her calling me madam, and I was only 6 years old. There was this weird thing unspoken, like it didn't feel right to me. And then there was this British household I grew up in where the culture that I grew up in was like, whatever you do, don't talk to the big elephant in the room, and just pretend like everything is fine, and sip your tea and be polite and all the things. And then there was the family tension. So there was like a lot of tension in the family. And so I started very young to feel into the undercurrents and the threats, and would do whatever I could in my little self, to create harmony, or to help appease, or to help tend to somebody that was tense. And looking back, it was all for my own safety and securing love and belonging in the family. And it became limiting it was a very wise strategy at the time, but then as you get older, then it's maladaptive. Then it's how I'm relating to partners, and then how I'm relating to all environments. And I'm not really holding on to, well, what is it that I'm needing? What's happening for me? Because I'm constantly looking out here at all the dynamics, and feeling into all of it, and like finding solution, like how do I bring these people back into harmony, and and so that manifested in some what I would call codependent patterns.
Hello, sacred humans. Quickly, I want to share with you something I've added into my daily rituals that has me buzzing, and that is Rise Mushroom Coffee. Rise entered my life through my Instagram algorithm that obviously knows what products I like, and I gave it a try, and just wow, it has amazingly delicious flavor. Not only this, they also have a mushroom matcha powder. Phew, mind blown. And they're filled with superfoods and super mushrooms. What I like about Rise is that they use 100% organic ingredients, and their mushroom farms are located in California. If you've always wanted to try mushroom coffee but haven't yet pulled the trigger, this is your moment. And there is zero risk because they have a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're interested in the deliciousness of Rise mushroom elixirs, head to the show notes and you will find a link for 20% off your first order. Or simply use the discount code Jessica, all caps, at checkout. That's JESSICA, all caps, at checkout. And now, let's get back to our amazing episode of the Seikird Healing Podcast.
But as I continue to grow and do my work and transcend, I also realized that ability became a superpower in the clients that I work with, and in the rooms that I walk into. And I really strengthened those abilities. But I had to learn how to turn them on and off as needed. And through my work of my own, coming into my own sense of self and my own sovereignty and my own, wholeness and health, then I got to use those as superpowers, but then not as a coping strategy anymore. So does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see it. I'm seeing like the embodiment of you using all of those gifts as superpowers. And thank you for sharing that about, growing up, because I can imagine that growing up in South Africa is quite different than how I grew up here in America.
Mhm.
Um,
Would you be willing to share your coping strategy that became a superpower?
there's probably a lot of them. Um, what I'll say is that I used a coping strategy of being really strong, and not in a way of like I'm big and tough, because I'm little. For those who know
Mm-hmm.
you, like I'm tiny, but I exuded a level of strength um through martial arts when I was little, and through just wanting to be the best, wanting to be like, it's odd because my parents weren't necessarily like pushing me in that way. It was a self-inflicted coping mechanism. Um, but I used that coping mechanism of wanting to be strong, and it turned into like this perfection mechanism that now I'm having to rewire, because I'm like, okay, it doesn't always have to be
Mm-hmm.
perfect. Doesn't always have to be
Mm-hmm.
seen in this way. And so I'm having to like detangle all those currents.
Mm-hmm.
But I've used it as my superpower in communication and in holding space and holding containers, and in relating to people that are using strength and like power as a way to cope with their own situations that they've had to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, go through in their family. So I would say that that's probably
Mm-hmm.
one of many one of many coping mechanisms.
Yeah, I imagine that one also um, brings excellence into what you do.
Well, I hope that it does. I think I've always pushed myself professionally and personally. And
Mhm.
so there's a high level of standard and expectation from me to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A blessing and a curse.
Absolutely. Because it is a superpower, but at the same time, I almost have this like mantra that I repeat to myself where I'm like, done is better than perfect. Done is better than perfect, right? Because
Yeah,
a lot of the time people want to see the authentic version of whatever it is that I'm creating, rather than the perfected version of whatever it is that I'm creating.
totally.
And
And
so,
these
yeah.
these particular strategies, superpowers, it's interesting. I've been explaining it lately with clients where it's like the train comes to the station. And you can either, and this could be seen like a trigger or a belief or our strategy, that it's not that the train doesn't come to the station anymore, but we have the choice to stay on the platform or to get on the train and go down that fast track of like, now I'm following that perfectionist, trigger or undercurrent, and next thing I know I'm like way down the track, and it's hard to come back to balance. Or I can look at it coming to the station and say, oh, hi train, hi excellence, hi perfectionism, I'm not going to jump on the train, I'm going to choose to let you go by, thank you, bless you, and done is good enough.
Yeah, and it's funny because I just launched the first episode of this podcast a week ago. And
Congratulations.
thank you. And I recorded that episode 2 years ago. So that is like the deep like coding of it has to be a certain thing. I had to have spoken a certain way. I didn't articulate that in the way that I wanted to. And it was one of those things where I'm like, you know what? I just have to let go of all of that, because it's not about me. This conversation is powerful because of the person I was talking to. And I'm like taking away that person's magic by not sharing this with the world because I'm so self-critical. So
Mm,
there's a
mm.
lot of that that's still like, it's growth is lifelong. And so I'm on the journey, and so that's what I've been leaning into that a lot recently, in addition to that deep listening. Because
Mm,
it's something it's coded, but I need to decode it. And
mhm.
and also being a somatic practitioner, it's something where whenever I deliver my medicine woman powers, I get to take away something from that too. And so there's
Mhm.
been little gifts along the way where I'm like, oh, like people are so beautiful in their imperfection. People are
Yeah.
so beautiful in their authentic expression of who they are without the filter. And so not
Yes.
needing that has been like a big lesson. Um, and you
That's
studied
beautiful.
somatics. Didn't you study somatics and when
I
I remember
did.
you,
So
yeah.
I did somatic breath work. I studied a different modality that was a somatic modality in my early 20s, a work called body mind centering. And it was a somatic body work that yeah, was kind of the foundation of how I relate with people. I think that was really the beginning of the path of seeking kind of this authentic way of being with people. And yeah, I think that's a huge part of where we're moving in humanity, or where I hope we're moving is, you talked about, well, let me slow down. There's a couple pieces. You were talking about people want to see a more authentic, imperfect, use the word imperfect, but really it's like authentic humanity. And when we can show up that way and invite others to do that without the filters, without the barriers, without the masks that we've all learned to carry, and people open up their hearts and we see each other and we hear each other, um, it's very powerful. And I think that that's what so many people are craving so badly. And so a lot of this, I guess I'm just happy to hear that this has been your journey, and that you're also receiving, like when you show up that way and you invite other people to show up that way, there's this reciprocity that happens. Like the gift that's coming through you or through us is being received because there aren't, as many filters and masks, and people really feel that. Um, and then in turn, you get that feedback loop of like seeing the impact that that has and the invitation to others. And then everybody's just rising up together.
Yeah, rising tide lifts all boats. So we got
Hmm.
to show up that
Hmm.
way. If we want the world to change, we have to show up in that way ourselves.
It's
Um,
interesting. I just heard I re-listened to a podcast from a long time ago with Tim Ferriss and Brene Brown. And one of the questions he asked her was, out of all the people out there talking about this stuff, why do you think that you have such a particular following and people are responding to you so well? And she said, I've thought about that a lot. And I think the reason is because I'm revealing just as much, like I'm in this mess with you all too. Like she's very candid about the things that are hard for her, and she just reveals herself fully, and people respond to that because we all want permission. We all want to, yeah, have permission to be ourselves, to be authentic, to feel each other's authenticity. I think that's what we're all craving.
mm, absolutely. And I'm such a huge fan of Tim Ferriss and Brene Brown. So even just that thought popping into your head, it's like, yes.
Yes.
Um, And that kind of brings us to the methodology that you've used in spaces that I've been a part of, which is the circling methodology. And that is a methodology of communicating where you do feel seen and understood and accepted. Would you be open to talking about that particular methodology and how you weave that into spaces that you're a part of and how it changes the
Sure.
communication?
Sure. So the circling methodology it's got an interesting history, and how to talk about it. It's funny, every time I talk about it, it's a little bit different. But it's this way in which we learn to be together, which is probably a very old way of being together. But it's putting our communication, bad habits in our back pocket, getting really present with each other. And the very first rule is sovereignty. So knowing that I'm having an experience, being able to name it, and know that anything that I'm experiencing is not necessarily you've made me feel that way, but this is my interpretation. This is what's happening for me as I listen to you. We practice with particular tenets like own your experience. So anything that I share in relation to you is I'm noticing, I feel, or I imagine the stories I make up about, what you're saying or what you're doing. And then I get to check reality out with you. So it's slowing down, taking the assumptions out of the picture, owning our experience, and then actually getting curious about what is it like to be you? Like, what is it like for you? How does the world occur to you moment to moment? And I watch any tendency to try, there's no like trying to fix you. Like, so if you're sharing a challenging experience or, maybe you're going through some suffering, instead of the old kind of conditioned ways of trying to make you feel better, I'm welcoming whatever is. So I'm in my body as I'm listening to you and I'm getting curious without trying to change you, fix you, advise you out of your challenged experience. I'm just truly getting curious. And then I'm also sharing what it's like for me to be with you in the listening of you. And this way, we sort of go moment to moment and find this space where there's this in the moment authentic sharing and embracing whatever is occurring with these particular tenets and agreements that allow us to have the safety and structure to really reveal what's happening and be in relation, like pay attention to the field between us. And, in that process, it's not meant to be therapeutic, but it ends up being therapeutic, and people end up feeling seen and heard like they haven't before. It's a beautiful way to receive real-time reflection, how people are receiving you. Yeah, and it can be done in in true circling form. You sit for almost 45 minutes with one person in a group of about 6 people. And that's like a whole way of being together, and you kind of go on this journey together. But the way I've been sharing it, especially at Fit for Service, is in these 2-hour workshops where we're distilling down these particular skills and helping people to come back into connection with each other. And for some reason, it's amazing to me because it's so simple in many ways, but yet it eludes us a lot. I think probably technology and I mean there's so many things that have added to this situation where we've become further and further away from each other. And so when we bring people into these spaces intentionally, it's amazing the impact it has. And people take to it really quickly because they get to have this felt experience of, oh my God, like I have permission to put all these masks down, and I have permission to actually look at your face, and I have permission to, feel you and actually feel my heart, and be vulnerable and be sort of in the space of not really knowing what's going to happen next. And it ends up becoming really alive and juicy and emergent, and as you've experienced, yeah, really fulfilling in many ways, and scary, like not without some anxiety at times, because intimacy is anxiety producing. But when you can stay present and actually allow the anxiety, and at the same time still like be seen in it, it can transcend to something else. But most of us are trying to hide our anxiety. Like, oh, it's not okay that I feel this way, or it's not okay that I feel less than you right now, or it's not okay that I'm feeling angry right now. And so we do all these different things to hide that. But when there's full permission that this is what's here, so let's just allow it and let's embrace it. It's all important. It's all accepted. Then, oh my God, it diffuses some of the charge of it. And we can get past, and we can get past it and find each other again. Find ourselves and find each other. Yeah.
Thank you for that explanation. And also, I know we don't have like 45 minutes to sit here and do like a full circling with each other, but I would love if you wouldn't mind like just doing some live version of what you're talking about, so that the people who are listening understand a little bit more about those prompts of I feel, I imagine, and witnessing all of those prompts that you're talking about. If you wouldn't mind, I would love to do some live circling if that would, yeah, if that would help.
Sure. So why don't we start with an exercise? This is one of my favorites. The way that it'll go is I will start off by saying, do you prefer Jess or Jessica?
Jessica.
Okay. So I would start by saying, Jessica, being with you right now, I notice, and then I'm going to share. I notice I feel, or I notice a sensation in me. I'm going to report what's happening inside of me. It's not going to be about Jessica. It's going to be about me. And then Jessica's going to hear that. And when I'm complete, she'll say, well, hearing that, I notice, I feel. And we're just going to go back and forth. And a little bit about this exercise. When we're two of us talking together, it's often that we're talking about something outside of us. It's about a thing that happened, or it's about something we want to do, or just anything outside of the space between us. So this is a way to practice paying attention moment to moment to what exactly is happening in the relational field between us. So we'll give it a try. Does that make sense? Are you good to go?
I'm good. Whatever comes up
Okay.
will come up. Letting go of the
Oh,
perfection.
yeah, exactly. Let go of perfectionism. Well, the perfect thing here is what's coming up. So, Jessica, being with you right now, I'm noticing respect. Like I feel respect. Um, and like if I were to be really honest about that, like I think I'm seeing you more clearly. Like I'm seeing more of you than I have before, with a sense of like respect and gravity and like trust.
Hearing that makes me feel validated in lessons that I've been trying to integrate. It makes me feel seen by somebody that I admire, a beautiful medicine woman, and it makes my heart light up.
Mm.
Mm.
So hearing that, I notice like some relaxation and groundedness inside of myself. And I just got a little distracted because I heard my sweetie doing dishes in my kitchen. So keep going, do it a couple more times. Hearing that.
Well, hearing that, I imagine him doing the dishes and having some playtime in the mundane moments of cleaning. Well, you get to enjoy this beautiful conversation, and it makes me feel happy. It makes me laugh.
Sweet. So I want to pause because there's a slight distinction here if you're open to it, because I think it's an important one. So in this exercise, the important thing is that we keep revealing ourselves, and then the slight distinction I'd love to make, and this is a common one, it makes me feel. So just think about that. Like when we say, and this is something we all say, it makes me feel, it's putting the onus on the other person versus I notice, I feel when X happened, as opposed to you made me feel. Because this is something we often do in relationship, as opposed to when you said X, I noticed, I felt. Do you feel the nuance of that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a slight nuance, but it does change every bit of that communication. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
because I think that's one of the things circling gets really good at is more and more and more we want to move into the place of understanding that everything that I'm experiencing, it's not that I'm not at the affect of things out here, but I'm fully sovereign in how, like, it is all, it's that, like, because I am who I am and the way that the world occurs to me, this is how I'm choosing essentially, or this is the perspective or the response inside of me. Because one person can say something to two different people, and to one person it's completely benign, neutral. To the other person, it's a huge trigger. And so it's like it's a way to continue to take ownership for our experience.
Today, I want to share with you all the delicious cacao with a K drinking chocolate. Cacao is one of my favorite brands of ceremonial grade cacao and is a delicious addition to my morning routine. Cacao is jam-packed with delicious nutrients that work with my body to stay energized, connected, and focused. What I also love about cacao is that they are a nonprofit on a mission to protect the native heirloom strands of cacao in both Peru and Guatemala by giving back to the farmers and communities that make it available to us. If you are interested in cacao with a K, go to the show notes and you will find a link for 10% off your first order, or simply by using the discount code Jessica, all caps at checkout. That's JESSICA, all capital letters at checkout.
So how about we finish with one more? Hearing that, I notice why don't you do one? And then I'll do one.
So hearing that, I notice that I'm very heady and I have a lot to integrate in terms of learning, but also softening into the most sacred thing is what is.
Mm.
And it makes me feel loved that
Mm.
you have taken the time to make that little distinction.
Mm. Mm. Hearing that, I feel gratitude and love. Yeah. Thank you. So that's one exercise. There's others. I don't know if you want to do any more.
Yeah, why don't we do one more and then we'll get into some
Okay.
other juicy topics.
Okay. Um, well, I could do I love to do this like curiosity exercise with two people. And this is a great thing because I love when people listen to podcasts to be able to actually walk away with a tool.
Mhm. Yeah.
So let's just say I'll tell you the structure first, and then we can try it if that's cool with you. So for like a minute, one person, in this case, it will be you, and you can share for a minute or two, a recent challenge you might have had, something that you're working with currently. Then I will paraphrase. So what I heard you say was, and when we paraphrase and like this, in some, areas, they might call it reflective listening. I'm just going to call it paraphrasing. It's not a word for word, but it's the gist. I report back to you the gist of what I heard you say. I check for accuracy to make sure I got it. Then I ask you a deepening question to help reveal more of that experience, to bring depth into our connection. And then I'll share what it was like to be with you in the listening of you. Is that okay? So why don't you go ahead and share, like for a minute or two, if you feel comfortable with it, something that you've been working with recently that's been feeling like a challenge slash opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that. So one thing I can share is that I have been really leaning into becoming my medicine woman version of myself and weaving all these magical powers into the world. And it's been really difficult because I have shed away layers and layers that I thought stories were telling me that they were necessary. And one of those is leaving my corporate job. And another one of those is really leaning into the art of devotion and manifesting with action and being able to recognize the deep power that is in that without having to worry about the financial stability that a regular, you know, quote unquote, regular job or career path may bring. And so that's been something in my life that more recently has been really challenging me. Um,
Mm, mm,
and kind of when it rains, it pours, like right when I made some of those big decisions to step into that, my car broke down and it's like completely dead. So I had to buy a new car. And well, I didn't have to. I got to buy a new car and I love my new car. Um, but like it seemed like things were happening in that moment that were testing me from the financial perspective, where I
mm,
had to be
mm.
like, nope, I'm grounded in this decision because I know that this is just a little test.
Nice. Okay, awesome. So what I think I heard you say, or what I did hear you say was one of the things you've been working with is wanting to step more into the magical powers of the medicine woman that you connect with and really embodying that essence of you and having to let go of layers upon layers of ways of being that you thought you needed, which were manifested in a corporate job. And so you made a bold decision to leave your corporate job. You also stepped into this devotion practice of manifestation and action. And wanting to trust all of that, you were faced with a multitude of things that seemed like a test for you of your car breaking down and other things where you were really faced with like, the need to trust. And while at the same time, some fear was arising around financial issues and security. So this is where I check in with Jessica and ask, like, did I get all of that, or is there anything I missed? Is there anything about that that I missed that you want to clarify?
You did not miss a thing. But
Yay!
if you did, I would clarify.
Thank you. Okay, so now that I know that I got that right, now Jessica can feel safe. Like, okay, she's with me, she's along for the ride. And even in me actually paraphrasing back, when we get to hear what we just shared, it sort of integrates on a different level. And I'll ask your experience after this. So now I'm gonna check in with myself. I'm gonna feel into what Jessica shared, and I'm gonna find like an authentic curiosity that would help me understand more of the experience that she just shared. So Jessica, what I would love to know more about is when you are in that space of feeling your magical medicine woman essence coming through you, what does it feel like?
That is like the juiciest question. Um, it feels like a remembrance of why I'm here on this planet. And it feels aligned. It feels like it is literally locking together pieces of my DNA into place in order to deliver dharmic magic into the world. And it is a deep knowing. It's a gnosis inside my body that makes me feel alive.
Mm, beautiful. So now, having heard that, I'm going to share with Jessica what it felt like for me to listen to everything she just shared. So hearing all of that, hearing the whole thing, both answers, first of all, I notice I have goosebumps when you talked about the alignment of your DNA, the gnosis in your body. And I watched something in your face, and it felt, yeah, I felt really activated. I still have goosies. And I felt enrolled in like a in support of or something. Like I felt inspired, I felt lifted up, and I felt kind of enrolled and like, oh, awesome. I want to support you in that. Um, and it felt really warm to me. So and then we'll just say, like, thank you. And we're going to complete that cycle. There's more we could do. So I just want to name the different pieces again. First, Jessica shared what's happening for her, like what's the challenge. Then I repeated back what I heard her say, the gist. I checked to make sure I got it all. Then I asked a deepening question. She revealed more. And then I got to share what it was like for me, not my reflection of her, not my analysis of her, but really what was like for me to be on the journey of listening to her. And I'd love to hear what that was all like for you, Jessica.
Well, it was a question that hadn't been posed before. So it actually started to, like, as I was saying the words like DNA locking, like it was physically doing that in my body. And so it
Mm,
like further just clicked into place things that I already know to be true. And then to hear you say, like, oh, I want to help you in that. I want to be this ally. It made me feel like, wow, like I want to be your ally too, to
Mm-hmm.
raise everyone up, like we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
it really felt like a clicking into place, and that a
Mm-hmm.
knowing of I'm on the right path, I'm following the tracks in the right way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you for doing that. And like just a couple more pieces about that. They're simple steps, but what you just shared it's in like the deep listening when somebody's really has their presence and attention on us, and they're willing to be here with us, holding space, getting curious, like it does provide a space for things to come out that we didn't even know yet. It brings an emergent quality. And also for me, I think that like providing that kind of presence and listening is a real act of love.
It's your biggest currency in this life. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing those activities and those methodologies and tools that people can actually take away in their tool belt. Because, like you said, when you listen to a podcast, you can hear something, but it might not fully integrate unless you have a few examples of what you might be able to bring out into your life.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, you are a relational life therapy coach. And one of the things that I think we just worked on was like intimacy, which is like, if you break that word down, it's into me, I see. And when you're working with people in these types of skillful relating in relationship, um, and like how to embody some of those types of energies, because I think, in relationship we can all say, oh yeah, let's sit down, do the circling, but both parties have to be aware and knowing that they're doing those methodologies. And so what would you say for people that are in relationship, um, when maybe different types of feelings and expressions come up, like those really charged energies, like the Kali energy or the finger pointing, blaming, scorekeeping type energy? What advice do you have, or what tools do you have that you work with people in your relational coaching? Because I would love to
Yeah.
get to what you actually do for people in addition to all of the, tools that you have in your medicine bag.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that question. So yeah, you don't have to be a circling aficionado to have a healthy communication in relationship. Really, my mission is to bring these simple skills to as many people as possible. And the circling, like sitting down and doing 45 minutes is lovely. But for me, I really like to take these tools out into the world in many different ways. And in relationship, I would say, well, there's a lot of pieces. When I work with folks who are in, let's just say it's a couple and they are finding themselves in a repetitive pattern of upset and fighting and dissonance on some degree. There's a huge range there. The first thing that we do is really look at, well, what is the dynamic? Because in most relationships, there's a dynamic or a dance that the couple is doing. And a lot of it is based on, you mentioned relational life therapy. That map is like a lot of what they're doing is basically relating to each other from what we call the adaptive child. So we talked about strategies before. We talked about our early environments. We all learned to cope and create strategies to protect ourselves, to get love, that were really wise at some point. But when we come into an intimate relationship where ultimately the ideal is that we're eye to eye, heart to heart, the minute we get triggered, something happens out in the environment, your partner says something, and literally your body is checking like 4 times a second, 6 times a second, I forget exactly, for safety. And a lot of our past is in our body, it's in our implicit memory. And so something happens before you know it in your neurology. You're no longer in your frontal cortex. You're in your mid-low brain. And so the biggest thing to know is that is not a place to relate from. So first, it requires awareness, self-awareness on to even know that that's what's happening, because it might take us to our strategies of trying to be right, trying to control, withdraw, retaliation is another one. Those are all losing strategies. So having enough awareness to say, and setting it up in your partnership that this is what we're going to do when these things happen, is to first call a timeout. We need to, we're not going to get anywhere productive right now. So let's agree to come back in 25 minutes. And that's important, to have a time container. You don't want to just leave it loose. That doesn't work either. That's horrible, especially for anxious attached people, like the anxious attached avoidant couple. That just doesn't work. So in that time, you go and actually really balance yourself. You tend to your inner child. You do your breath work. You ground. You get outside and put your feet on the earth. Whatever. Take a walk. Move the energy. And come back essentially to your adult brain, your wise adult. Remember that oh, this person is not my mother or my stepmother who, did X, Y, and Z to me when I was a kid. This is actually my love. And can we now employ some communication tools to try to understand what just happened and what was, how we got off the rails? And maybe there's even a request that I need to ask. So that structure is typically, and I think I led you all in Montana through a challenging conversation structure, which is when X happened, that's the objective truth. So when you walked into the kitchen and turned your head and said those words to me, you woke up late today. The story I made up, and that's where you tell your interpretation, because so often we see an action, we hear something, and then we make it a truth, but we don't realize, oh, that could be interpreted in many different ways. And I made the story up. So you said, oh, you woke up late today. The story I told myself is that you think I'm a lazy, no good piece of shit. And it reminded me of when my stepmom used to always say that, and then the next part is when and how I felt because of that story was rejected, afraid, defensive. And I wonder what was actually happening for you. And so do you see in the telling of it like that, I'm really owning it. I'm not making you wrong. I can't believe you said that to me when you came in the kitchen. You're always criticizing me. You never see me. That's the reactive, reflexive response a lot of us have, and that just perpetuates, because of course that person's going to feel attacked or put on the defensive. But if I share fully that, oh, this is what happened when X happened, and this is how I felt, and that has me feeling scared and withdrawn, and what was actually happening for you. So sometimes it might be, yeah, I did notice I had some judgment, or other times it could be, no, I was actually not thinking that at all. And I actually felt happy that you woke up late because you need some rest. You know, it could be something completely different. So I want to pause there and see if you have any questions or need for clarification or anything.
Well, what I'm hearing is that typically in relation, we may make up a story about what the other person says at times. And so just clarifying how you felt in that moment, and then if there's a need, requesting that need from your partner. But also something that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned was taking time, like taking a time out
Mm-hmm.
if needed to do some of
Yes.
those sacred healing methodologies like grounding into the earth, like taking some breath, like,
Mm-hmm.
doing some, 10 minutes meditation, whatever it might be, to bring you back into awareness with yourself so that you're not in that part of your brain that's functioning from the coping mechanism point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So taking responsibility for that, because that's not your partner's fault. That's not your partner's thing. It's like taking full ownership and responsibility. I am triggered right now. This is probably not about you. This isn't going to go well if we speak from this place. How about we take a time out and come back? Yeah. And then like piecing it together and taking ownership. And then if it gets to a request, and maybe in the same, you know, example that I pulled out of the air, it could be, you know, it would mean so much to me if in the morning when I first see you, before you ask me questions, that you could come over and give me a hug. That would be so impactful for me. Is that possible for you? And then you really like any request has to be, you have to be ready for a yes or a no. It's not a demand. A demand would be like, you need to do this every morning for me to feel okay. No, it's like this would mean so much to me. I, it really would. Like, I think regulating my nervous system really sets me off for a great day. Is this possible for you? And then the other partner, your response is yes, of course, unless it's at too much of a cost to you. Yeah. So I think most people know what that really means for them.
Yeah, and I like how you make that distinction because it's not just like a hey, roll over and do whatever I say. It's not a demand. It's a request that would make the other person regulate their nervous system or feel a certain relaxation or safety.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if it's asking the other person to change who they are or dysregulate their safety or nervous system, then it's not just
Hmm.
a like, hey, I'm going to do whatever you say. It's actually making a deal, making a
Hmm.
collaboration about how you're going to move forward in that part of your relationship and that type of communication that you may have that's mutually beneficial rather than,
Yes.
hurting one person
Yes.
to then help the other. Right.
Exactly. I love that you're bringing that up, Jess. I think we're in such an individualistic society that most people forget that when we're in relationship, we're part of an ecosystem and there's an us. And, there might be also family members, children, and that instead of like, we really need to move away from me versus you to us and like the collaborative, like what's good for the system here? What's good for the system, and what's good for the system is good for me and it's good for you and everybody benefits. But it's also not good for the system to compromise yourself so much that you no longer are attending to your own needs. And yeah, so it's a balancing act for
It's a dance.
sure. It's a dance.
Dance. Yeah. And so what does conscious relationship mean to you?
Mm, I like this question. So for me, I think the easiest way for me to put it is I am stepping into a relationship knowing that we are all mirrors of each other, first of all, that we're both willing to basically, this is actually, I'm going to use the words of Mark Gaffney. He talked about this, about like how our job is to really be the midwife to the birth of the other's higher self. And there's many aspects to conscious relationship, like but I think it's generally the understanding that we are here to support and become the higher versions of ourselves by holding I want to hold myself. It's not that I want to merge with you. So there's the independence and the interdependence. And the we that we become is actually in relation to like a purpose. Like our relationship is actually benefiting our entire, like our family, our community, the world at large, when I can let go of all my masks and really be eye to eye and heart to heart with you in this kind of co-creative space, keeping the whole in mind for the benefit of the whole. That's how it occurs to me today. And there's like lots of lovely practices to engage in. I think in order to sustain that, to be continually committed to that container, there's communication practices, there's our spiritual practices of, meditation, visioning, breath work, movement, sexual practices. There's how are we giving back? How are we serving the people around us? And then we're all living in this world where we can get easily pulled off track. So like continuing, how do we center ourselves as a couple? I mean, Mark and I were just having that conversation of like, as things get busier, because we both feel this like things are moving really quickly. We're both, going to be out in the world. Like that's my mission this year, is to get out and spread some of those, like the circling technology, to many more groups of people. And there's more demand and there's more pressure from the outside and more need. And how do we stay in that healthy, grounded place with our practices and with each other and with our family and our work in the world and our priorities, no matter how many like pressures occur? How are we attending to that space regularly?
Mm. For those of you who don't already know, my husband and I own a coffee company called Gayhead Coffee. And of course, we drink our own coffee every day, and it's some of the most flavorful and inviting coffee, especially with the nostalgia of coming from a can rather than paper or plastic packaging. But I'm biased, so check it out for yourself. If you're interested, head over to the show notes where you will find a link to order your coffee today from gayheadcoffee.com. That's GAYHEADCOFFEE.com. Thank you all for your support. It means the world to us as a small business. Yeah, that's beautiful. And it actually reminds me of you and I got to experience a beautiful embodiment meditation in Sedona with John Churchill.
That was my favorite.
It was so mind-blowing and impactful. And when you were just talking about like how do you come back and stay like grounded in, like that's one of the technologies that I took away from that Sedona experience container that we were in, that I was like, whoa, that was powerful. I'm curious to hear your perspective on that experience, because that was the deepest I've gone in meditation.
I will second
Powerful.
that. I feel the same way. That was hands down my my favorite, like my most meaningful experience there. I mean, there were many meaningful experiences, but that one, like the way that and it's funny because I've been using it since, and I've been sharing, not that I don't want to say I know the depth of John Churchill's practice and how to, but the sensibility of it, of like deep grounding into the earth, connecting to Father Sky through, pituitary or the crown, however you want to think of it. And then the heart at the center of that, and the widening of the energetics of the heart, not just the widening, but like the expansion in all directions of the heart. And then, that being kind of like the central axis, the ground, sky, heart in the center. And then it was so much fun to also feel, I think it was like the next day when Matthias talked about the feminine and the masculine. So like the cross, with the heart in the center. And so anyway, I love that meditation so much, and I'm using it so frequently. I feel like it's the fastest way to find my alignment. And I just keep coming back to that over and over again. Yeah.
Yeah. That was such a
What?
magical experience. And
Yeah.
yeah, I'll second the heart opening, because we spent so much time there, where in meditation previously, and like I mentioned earlier, I'm like queen of distraction. So I'm like, cool, cool, cool. We're on the heart. Like, okay, we did the heart. Like, let's move on. Like, where are we doing the chakras? What are we doing? But he stayed in the heart for a long, I don't know, like time was not a thing for me when we
It
were
was
in that.
timeless. It was timeless time. I could have stayed there for another hour doing that meditation.
Absolutely. And I don't even know how long it was. Did 3 hours pass? Did 1 hour pass? Like, what the heck just happened? So we really like time morphing into a different dimension. But the way that, and for those listening who don't know John Churchill's work, please look him up. But the way that he stayed in the heart space and really like expanded and expanded and expanded and expanded out on a cellular level, so that like every 75 trillion of your cells were like, yeah, we're talking about the heart, like we're dancing. And it was one of those embodiment meditation experiences that I felt somatically that I haven't felt with meditation before. And so
Mhm.
I'm just so
Mhm.
grateful that we got to experience that, and that now it is a tool
Mhm.
that we can turn
Mhm.
to.
Yes,
In
and
those
actually
moments.
after that, I had this spark of desire in me to then take that level of embodied meditation and then turn people to each other and do some of the relational practices together. Like, how beautiful would that be? And sadly, like we had a little bit of email interaction afterwards, and then everybody gets busy. And so there had been some conversation about the possibility of that. But it was one of the threads that never actually went somewhere, but maybe in the future it will. But I love that combination of deep embodied presence meditation and then turn people towards each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really powerful. So you're putting that spell out into the world again. And I'm curious for you, speaking of like following tracks, like how do you say yes to the little breadcrumbs, and how do you know what are the right breadcrumbs or the right tracks or the right paths to follow down for you? And what's been your kind of like North Star in terms of following what feels really good for you throughout your life that's gotten you to where you are today?
Oh, what a sweet question. That's pretty much how I've led my life. I'm a very felt sense person. What do they call that? Clairsentient or whatever. But like I have these moments. It could be while I'm doing the dishes, or it could be in a meditation, or it could be even taking a walk where an idea just surfaces out of nowhere. And I've learned to follow that. I've learned to follow those ideas. And I think it's also my mindset. Like I'm positively expectant and very enthusiastic and, pretty optimistic. And I'm a connector. So when I'm out in my day or out in the world, I'm tuned in to where those places are. Like I think there's already like a sensor on me that all of a sudden is like, bzzz. And I've had so many experiences where people have said, hey, I would like you to, like I followed a thread and then that opened up something and it might have brought up a shit ton of fear. And then I'm like, oh, yeah, step in that direction. And it might even feel in that moment when I get invited to do something that, I hear the voices of like, who are you to do that? The little self-critical voices, those voices that want to keep me small.
I don't have those,
But
Cathy.
you're perfect, remember?
I don't have those. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about.
Nobody does. I'm the only one. I just revealed myself. I'm
Woo.
so embarrassed. But stepping into because I guess I just have learned over the years to trust that, because every time I've said yes, despite my fear, it has been exactly the right thing, like every step of the way. I would never have imagined that I would have been teaching all year last year for Fit for Service. Like, I never imagined that like, I imagined one time, I imagined, I think I've told the story that I was listening to Aubrey Marcus during the pandemic because I was loving the conversations he was having. And I remember sitting on my couch watching a podcast on YouTube. And I said to myself, I might have even said it out loud. I was like, he's going to find circling and I'm going to be there. And it wasn't like I have to be there. It wasn't like a will. It was just a knowing. It was that gnosis that you talked about. And it wasn't that much longer after that knowing that I got my very first invitation. And then I kept getting invited and I kept following the crumbs. And I remember having like multiple moments last year where I literally was like, wow, this is my life. Like, how? I don't know how, but like there's something so affirming about being here and having followed the breadcrumbs, and that was just really sealed my faith in, yeah. So I hope that's answers your question adequately.
Yeah, it does. And I know we don't have too much time left, but I would love to, before we get off, I would love to talk to you about one more specific tool that people can take
Yes.
into their tool belt. And then we'll talk about where everyone can find you and all that goodness. But one other thing I had on my list to chat with you about was is eye gazing. And it is one of like the most powerful tools that I didn't know I needed in my life. And it's definitely like it might not be for everyone, but you led an exercise where we were there was probably like 200 people in a room. And we were kind of just like weaving through, and then we would stop at it was kind of like musical chairs, like when the music stops, turn and face the partner. And we would stop in front of somebody and then we wouldn't say a word to each other. It would just be looking into each other's eyes for like 2 minutes. I mean, it was an extended period of time. And to kind of like circle this back around to where we started, which is like that deep listening, and that the biggest currency that you can give is your attention and your presence. The act of just gazing into the other person's eyes, not saying any words at all, was one of those tools that not only like I felt like I knew that person lifetimes just from 2 minutes, but also it helped me with deeper listening and not having to speak, not having to fill the space with nonsense words, but really just paying attention to the little nuances of a blink or the, crinkling of a brow or a
Mm,
smile or,
mm.
the little like smiling of the eyes. And so it was such a deeper level of awareness and listening and attention and presence. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about eye gazing, which probably
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
scary to a lot of people, but I would love to chat about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love hearing your experience of it. Um, as I'm listening to you, I'm realizing how much you have taken all of this in, and yeah, I feel really grateful. Yeah, eye gazing. First, I mean, I think we spend most of our life avoiding eye contact. I mean, not all of us. I think I came in like looking for eyes. There's pictures of me as a little kid, and I'm literally like, connect with me. Um, but oh God, there's something so magical about it. I think I was inspired by John O'Donohue. I don't know if you're familiar. He's an Irish mystic. I'm just going to say that, and poet, and he's crossed the veil. He's no longer with us. But look at his poetry sometime. Um, but he talked about the face, and it was like I'm butchering it, but this is my interpretation. But really, when you look at someone's face, it's the most exposed part of our body. It carries all of our stories, our ancestry, yeah, all of our pain, our suffering, joy, ecstasy. So much is here in our face. And then the eyes, it's a window to the soul. And so to take a moment and to have the permission to really take in the miracle of looking at this other human who is physiologically, has the same amazing technology and intelligence. Our bodies are working constantly. I mean, it's just remarkable. So physiologically, we're kind of this same-ish, with different DNA and different expressions. Our wants and needs and desires, our need for belonging, our need for connection, to be seen, to be loved, those things are similar. But we all have such a particular, unique way of seeing the world and a particular set, like a particular signature and a particular uniqueness. So it's that beautiful paradox of like oneness and, onenesses, like each one of us is our own individual one, and we're all one. And so to stand and like be present in all of those layers of complexity and simplicity all at the same time, to me, is sometimes as ecstatic as the things we think about when we talk about ecstasy. That's for me. But so much can happen. Like I have stood eye gazing with people and had just tears rolling down my face. I have had mystical experiences. I have had, you know, like energy, you can feel the energy so strongly. So much information is being exchanged. Um, for some people, it can like it definitely can activate the nervous system. And if somebody has a lot of trauma in their past, if you're interested in trying eye gazing, it sometimes is important to listen to your neurology, and you might need to look away and come back, look away and come back, and kind of learn to extend the time of eye gazing. And as I'm even saying this, I'm imagining the listeners might be like, well, why do it? Like, what's the point other than these mystical, lovely experiences? I think it's just this beautiful ability for connection without words, to be able to stand and feel myself while taking in another. Words can take us on a different path, but it's a direct way to be able to hold both myself and to take you in at the same time. It's a beautiful practice. And it's a practice of intimacy. And honestly, our ability to tolerate our own anxiety is relative to the amount of intimacy we can experience. So if you can extend and expand your capacity to be in your own discomfort, because this is something we don't usually do, while at the same time allowing some enjoyment or like impact on what it's like to take in this other miracle of a human across from you. I think it's almost like being on a medicine. It's a beautiful thing. Thanks for bringing that forward.
Yeah, it's definitely ceremony. And, we are all these magical beings that have little antennas on top of our heads. And when we get into the closeness of each other's energy fields, it is ceremony. Like that's where the magic can really, really happen. And we can start communicating with each other, like telepathically, if you will.
Yeah.
This information that, like you mentioned, is intimacy or into UIC.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your sacred medicine and all of these beautiful practices. I could have talked to you for 3 more hours about many other things, but I appreciate and I'm so grateful for your time and your presence and your attention and your listening and for being willing to actually do some of the things that you teach live, which is also scary for me. So appreciate your willingness to go there. For people that want to find you and work with you as a relational coach or a communication cultivator, how can
Mhm.
they connect with you? Where can people find you and where are you most active?
Yeah, thank you. They can find me on my website, which is just cathycourtenay.com, or on Instagram is a good place too. That's Cathy Courtenay. And I guess I would love to say I mentioned before, my mission for 2024 is to go to spaces. I think what I see, my vision is I create in the workshop that I offer. It could be a 2-hour workshop. It's the opener for a summit or an event or a retreat, like a wellness retreat. Because doing these exercises at the front, at the opening of an organized collaborative event, maybe there's multiple speakers or there's a particular purpose to an event, is a wonderful way to bring coherence to a group of people and to sort of create readiness for for the entire event. That it's a way to sort of create a tone of connection and coherence. And so I am particularly interested in growing that aspect of my business, and it's also on my website. Yes, and people can contact me if they have questions or anything like that.
And just to kind of put emphasis on that spell that you just cast into the world, I've seen you do that work in containers, and it really does like just make a little crack in the shell of the egg so that people can start to open their hearts maybe a little bit more and deepen and soften into whatever is coming next, whether it's a retreat or a summit or whatever the container is. It really just helps everyone relax, just relax so that they
Mm,
can show up as their authentic selves and just kind of get a little bit more softening, 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 softening. So it really
mm,
does kind of, it's the icebreaker, if you will, for
yeah.
for that to really occur on a deeper level if that's what you're going for. So
Yeah.
I will put an exclamation point after the spell that you just that you just cast
Oh,
in the world. And again, thank you for taking the time to grace us with your presence on the Sacred Healing Podcast. And I hope that everyone takes away some valuable tools for their tool belt. And definitely check out Cathy's website. She has a wealth of knowledge. And thank you, Cathy.
Jessica, thank you so much for having me and for such a wonderful conversation. And yeah, I am so pleased to see you bringing your magic into the world.
Thank
Much
you.
love to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
I'm so